Part 61. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 601. Chapter 601 A Psychopath. Yuan hopes that when the soul tree wakes up this time, it can be promoted to the immortal tree. Thinking of this, Yuan stepped out of the Red Land to prepare things for the soul tree to survive the thunder tribulation. The demonic plant is no thicker and thicker than the demonic beast, and is the most fragile. Therefore, the demonic plant is like a piece of paper when struck by lightning, and nothing will be done if it is chopped. This is also the reason why demonic plants are rare. The first thing Yuan prepared was the divine clothes, which were quite useful in the fairy world. After going to the god realm, Yuan was thinking about researching the star array and creating a lightning protection array. However, this still had to rely on Mujukan to help him draw the array diagram first. She just followed the gourd diagram. Yuan prepared her things and prepared to go to the city to buy some things and return to the fairyland. It is safer for a treasure like the soul tree to survive the tribulation in the immortal realm. People in the immortal realm are not so sensitive to soul power, unlike people in the soul realm. The soul tree is the most fatal temptation for them. Yuan stepped out of the space. Suddenly, a force grabbed her. Yes, it was like someone grabbed her from the sky, and imprisoned her in one fell swoop. Yuan was horrified. Her consciousness was about to enter the space, but unfortunately, even her soul was imprisoned. "Humph, you don't overestimate your capabilities," a distant and pleasant voice sounded in her ears, as if coming from the distant sky. Yuan's mind was racing. Who imprisoned her? That voice was a woman. What was that woman going to do? Who is she? How should she deal with it? A series of questions flashed through Yuan's mind. At this moment, the gripping force grabbed her and sucked her into the sky, followed by a sudden spin, and then she lost consciousness. When she woke up again, she felt a splitting headache. "Are you awake?" a female voice said. Yuan raised her head with difficulty. What came into focus was a beautiful face, looking at her with a smile but not a smile, but the smile did not reach her eyes, and she was playing with something in her hand. And that thing is the artifact that protects her soul in her sea of consciousness. "Senior, why do you want to arrest me?" Yuan said with difficulty. "Why? You don't know? Does the fragrance of the soul fairy flower smell good? If you dare to steal the soul fairy flower, you are really tired of living." Yuan understood what the woman said. Junior people don't know that it has an owner. Yuan showed weakness. She didn't know whether this woman wanted her life or flowers, or whether she wanted both. Now that her soul is imprisoned, she is the lamb to be slaughtered in front of this woman. "You are smart." The woman pinched her face. It seemed like a gentle pinch, but the force was so strong that Yuan wanted to die. Yuan estimated that her face would be disfigured if she didn't take the healing elixir. "I hate women who are more beautiful than me the most. You are the second one. Why do you think you, a girl from the lower world, are so beautiful?" Yuan. The woman spoke lightly, but her behavior was anything but. Her hand pinched the other side of Yuan's face. Pinched hard, the pain made Yuan burst into tears. In her mind, she asked all the 18 generations of this crazy woman's ancestors. How come the soul fairy flower she got in the soul realm becomes hers? From the tone of this crazy woman, this is in the god realm, and she is still a goddess. She can give her the soul immortal flower if she wants it. Why is she torturing her like this? It kills people with no more than a nod, torturing her face. Yuan gritted her teeth and let her toss her around. She could feel that this woman was venting her anger. She was scolding the goddess in her heart. She was still a goddess. She was almost a psychopath. This psychopath was probably a psychopath. Do not make a woman angry at this time. The more you make her angry, the more she will suffer. Moreover, you cannot show off in front of her. The more humble you are, the happier she will be. So Yuan burst into tears, looking pitifully and humbly at the lunatic. As expected, Crazy was delighted by her look. She let go of her hand and patted her face again. "This is the right thing, don't always look so arrogant." The words were spoken to Yuan, but she knew they were definitely not meant for her. Yuan didn't say a word, hoping that this lunatic would go away quickly and that she would be lucky enough to break through the confinement. When she breaks through the confinement, she will let this lunatic be her slave, torturing her every day in order to undo the sin she suffered today. The madman seemed to feel relieved. She pushed Yuan to the ground, punched and kicked her until she was half dead before turning around and leaving. After she left, Yuan squinted her eyes and forced herself to sit up before looking at the place. She seemed to be in a cave. There were several pearls as big as rubber embedded in the stone wall, making the cave as bright as day. She glanced at the entrance of the cave and saw a stream of light sliding around. It was obviously a formation. "If you can't get out, you'd better free your soul first." The original Lord God couldn't restrain her, and a lunatic couldn't compare to the Lord God. Furthermore, at that time, she was only in the Mahayana stage, and she was not on the same level as she is now. Now that she is not only an immortal king, but her soul has already broken through the 5th level of Star Soulju, it is not easy to break through the confinement. Yuan was not too happy. She practiced the Star Soul art as fast as possible. If the confinement was not released yet, the madness would come again. An hour later, Yuan opened her eyes. A flash of light flashed in her eyes, and with a flash of consciousness, she entered the space. Psycho, just wait for her revenge. Yuan entered the space without telling Mujukan, nor did she treat her injuries. She directly called Xiaja and asked her to find the psychopath. "Master, look." Xiaja found Madman and asked her to look. Yuan looked over with consciousness and saw Madman sitting on a high mountain with his eyes closed. In front of her was a soul fairy flower that was twice as big as the one in her space. There is a cage opposite, and a woman in white is locked in the cage. Every other part of the woman in white was good, but her face was terrible, much worse than before. No wonder the crazy person said that she is the second prettiest person, and the first one is here. This is crazy. Yuan immediately forced out a drop of blood essence and quickly shot it into the sea of consciousness of the crazy person, followed by a divine master recognition spell that shot into the sea of consciousness of the crazy person. The neurotic body suddenly trembled and resisted. Yuan sneered, "What's the use of resisting? She would never be willing to contract her as her maid for the rest of her life." Psycho resisted for half a stick of incense and finally succeeded. With a sudden movement of consciousness, Yuan took the big soul fairy flower in and threw them into the pool. Unexpectedly, when the big soul fairy flower saw the one in the pond, it moved and swallowed up the smaller one in one go. Yuan blinked. Why was there another demon plant? No, this plant should be a sacred plant. Master Crazy saw everything in the space at this time, lowered his head and shouted respectfully. Yuan gave her a cool look, put his face in front of her, pointed at his face and said, "Come on, beat me again. Wasn't it very majestic just now? You are the first to beat me like this." End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 602. Chapter 602 Yaoji Goddess. Waner, what's going on? Mujukan appeared in front of her in a flash, looked at Madman angrily, and held her in his arms. It was this lunatic who did it? In the soul world, she kidnapped me inexplicably as soon as I came out and made me like this. Yuan lay in Mujukan's arms and said aggrievedly. Boom. As soon as she finished speaking, Mujukan kicked the lunatic out. "I'll take care of you later." Mujukan said something sinisterly, carried Yuan into the house, and immediately gave her a healing elixir. Then he asked distressedly, "Does it hurt?" Yuan nodded and threw herself into his arms again. Mujukin felt extremely distressed. This was the first time that his Wanner had begged for comfort in such a wronged manner. He patted her gently on the back. He waved his hand, and the golden dragon appeared outside the wooden house. "Owner! Go and bring that woman to me." The new one, he wanted to ask if it was the one his master kicked away, but he was afraid that the master would scold him, so he changed his words. "Right." Jinlong nodded and went to find it. On the other side, the psychopath was kicked until she was confused. She has always been confused. How come she became the slave of that little nun? Seeing Jinlong, who was still aggressive, Jinlong flew away when she mentioned her. Neuropathy is not dare to resist at all, knowing that he has been made for the little female practitioner. No, the owner is now angry. Golden Dragon threw her in front of the wooden house, and then stood aside waiting for the master's order. "Jinlong, beat her face to pieces," Mujukin said coldly. He was reluctant to touch even a hair of Wanner. This woman who was looking for death actually beat Wanner like this. Yes. After Jinlong responded, he raised his palm and hit the crazy person on the face. Psycho is a after all. The golden dragon's palm was equivalent to tickling her. It didn't hurt, but when she was slapped in the face, she felt very angry. But she could only grit her teeth and endure it. No matter how stupid she was, she could not provoke the other party. She thought that the daughter of her majestic Lord God would end up like this. He even robbed her of the soul flower. As long as she gets away, she must make it impossible for these two people to survive or die. Yuan saw this reversal in Mujukin's arms, and the depression in her chest finally disappeared. She got up, walked up to the psychopath, and kicked her in the face. "How about it? Have you ever thought about today, you perverted psychopath?" Psycho looked up at Yuan, his eyes filled with anger. Boom! Yuan kicked him again. "You're still not convinced, didn't you humiliate me in the same way?" The psychotic pursed his lips, said nothing, and looked at Yuan bitterly. The fists under her body were clenched tightly. She really wanted to punch Yuan, but she couldn't. As long as she has the intention to kill her lord, she will suffer heart-gnawing pain and even her soul will disappear. Who knows that a little female cultivator from the lower realm actually understands the contract method of the divine realm, which makes her dare not resist. The backlash after resisting is not something she can bear. She endured in order to survive. Yuan looked at her forbearance and was almost out of temper, so he kicked her to an empty mountain and imprisoned her. Talking back to others, she took the cage from the boundary door into the space, locked the lunatic in, and let her taste the feeling of being imprisoned. Outside, the imprisoned woman suddenly saw that she was free. She took a look with her consciousness and saw that the crazy woman was not there. She disappeared in a flash. Yuan saw her at the boundary gate and didn't stop her. She didn't save her out of pity, but wanted the cage. When she is no longer in the mood to imprison that lunatic, the cage is still a magical tool and can be kept for her own use. Of course, after imprisoning the psychopath, Yuan still searched for her. From the beginning, she never thought about keeping the psychopath alive. After the soul tree is successfully promoted, she will be the soul tree's first delicious meal. Although the psychopath is her slave, everyone knows what the situation is between the two, and she cannot guarantee that the psychopath will not harm her in the future. So, she only has one death. Who made her look for her unhappiness for no reason? The most important thing is that she now knows her space again. "How is it, has it been dealt with?" Mujukin asked. "Well, it's taken care of," Yuan nodded. With the matter settled, the two returned to the fairy world and prepared the soul tree to survive the catastrophe. On the other side, the imprisoned woman teleported to a deserted place in one breath. She quickly set up a barrier, took out a healing pill from the storage space, swallowed it, and began to heal. An hour later, she opened her eyes and let out a long breath. That woman was so crazy that they captured her and tortured her just because she was good looking. It is said that the Lord God's daughter, goddess Xiaoyan, is cruel, and that is indeed the case. She looked at the boundless world of gods, and a surge of resentment suddenly arose in her heart. Where was she going that the goddess Xiaoyan couldn't find? After searching in my mind, there really is no place for her in the god realm. No matter, let's leave the god realm first. She flipped her hands, and a string of symbols flew out from her fingers. The symbols formed a small spiral, and slowly the spiral began to rotate, getting faster and bigger. Suddenly, the woman stopped fighting and plunged into the whirlpool. When she entered the whirlpool, she and the whirlpool disappeared at the same time. When she reappeared, there was a desert beneath her feet. Huh? Where is this? Am I not mistaken? The woman said to herself, and then checked with her consciousness. Suddenly, she disappeared in a flash. When he appears again, he is in a small world. If Yuan is here, she must know where the woman is. At this time, she is in the only oasis in Xiwei continent. The woman looked at this place curiously, wondering how the Xiwei continent had become like this. She was checking here with her consciousness, and suddenly she saw an amethyst coffin in a palace. Amethyst is a rare thing in the divine world, and it is one of the indispensable main materials for refining artifacts. Someone actually used it to make a coffin here. She looked carefully at the person in the coffin and was shocked. This person's face, this was the goddess Yaoji. The woman's consciousness checked it several times to confirm that it was correct. She immediately became invisible and appeared in front of the purple gold coffin with a flash of consciousness. She is a space magician, these barriers are useless to her, she can easily enter. The woman looked at the man in the coffin closely and carefully. Yes, that's right. In the god realm, it is said that Emperor Tianyan and his wife have disappeared. It turns out that the rumor is true. I just don't know why the goddess Yaoji is here, and judging from her aura, it is clear that she is not there anymore. At this moment, the woman looked at the face of Yaoji in the coffin, and her heart skipped a beat. She saw such a face up close, it was so beautiful. She deserves to be the most beautiful woman in the divine world. As a woman herself, she was very moved by what she saw. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 603. Chapter 603. The Soul Tree Overcomes the Tribulation. The woman watched for a while, and after taking a long breath, she was very hesitant. Should she save the goddess Yaoji? Yaoji goddess is an existence standing in the clouds. Even though she is an existence that all the goddesses look up to, she is a gentle person, and there has never been any negative news about her in the divine world. Such a person is brought here by some evil person who has killed thousands of people. The goddess Yaoji has been here forever in this place without divine power or soul power. She will die completely in less than 10,000 years. It is a pity that such a person has faded away. The woman is in a dilemma. The person who can bring the goddess Yaoji here must be something special. But if she encountered her, no matter how hard she felt, she still wanted to avoid that crazy woman. The woman's heart is at war between heaven and man. Finally, she gritted her teeth and was rescued. When she came here, she met the goddess Yaoji. Maybe it was the arrangement of heaven. So she saved. She didn't dare to return to the god realm. She took a look at the purple gold coffin. The purple gold coffin still had some divine power. Then she found a place with soul power to let the goddess Yaoji slowly recover. Let's wait until goddess Yaoji wakes up. She looked at her storage space. There were still a lot of sacred stones in it, which should be enough. The woman did not hesitate for too long, raised her head and strangled, just like before, when a spiral nest was formed, the woman disappeared with the purple gold coffin. When she reappeared, the woman appeared in the soul world with a purple gold coffin. The woman found a soul vein, opened a cave, put up a barrier and formation, and then placed the purple gold coffin on the formation. After everything was finished, the woman sat in front of the purple gold coffin and looked at the goddess Yaoji carefully. Sure enough, in this rich soul power, the aura of goddess Yaoji is gradually getting stronger. The woman pursed her lips and smiled, so happy and charming. The matriarch returned to the palace and pinched her eyebrows with her hands. She had been staying there since Yuan disappeared out of thin air last time. She has not been seen again for so long. Only then did she find out that Yuan had teased her. She was very angry. If the smelly girl dared to tease her, she would definitely kill her if he caught her. At this time, the patriarch couldn't get rid of the depression in his heart, so he walked towards the secret room. Over the years, whenever she was unhappy, she always took it out on Yaoji. In short, he was her punching bag, otherwise it would have killed her long ago. The patriarch was extremely proud, because the woman whom the two great men of the gods were looking for was in her hands. He. But when she entered the secret room and saw the empty secret room, the patriarch was immediately confused. The formation she arranged cannot even be detected by the Lord God. Who took that away? Is it the Lord God? What about her now? The patriarch was panicked for a moment, running around in the secret room like a headless fly, and the Lord God couldn't help but squeeze her out of her mind. No, if it was the Lord God, he would have chopped me up right then and there. The patriarch calmed down and then thought, if the saved by the Lord God, their only oasis would not have been destroyed by her. It's definitely not him. She knows the Lord God's ruthless temper very well. Who is it? The patriarch murmured, but he was always uneasy in his heart. What if that wakes up one day and comes to take revenge on her? The clan leader gritted his teeth, packed his things, and told the elders of the clan that he was in seclusion and escaped. The elders didn't know what was going on, so of course they didn't have any objections. They were happy for her to stay in seclusion and not care about the affairs. In the fairy world, Yuan and Mujukan came out of the space together. Mujukan set up a formation, and Yuan moved the spiritual pets out, telling them to protect the law. The soul tree is finally going to survive the catastrophe. Yuan took it very seriously and cautiously. Even she had not prepared herself so carefully for her own tribulation. Waner, it's okay, move out. Mujukan laid out a formation and told Yuan. Yeah, Yuan nodded, sprinkled a layer of soul stones into the formation, and then moved the soul tree out. As soon as the soul tree came out, the soul tree returned to its original form. Immediately, dark clouds came over the sky and a roaring sound sounded in the sky. As soon as the soul tree felt the coming thunder disaster, its tree body couldn't help but tremble. Yuan just then threw the divine clothes on the top of the soul tree. Not long after, the calamity thunder fell. Boom! The thunderbolt as thick as a bucket struck the divine clothes, and a small part of the thunderbolt was transmitted to the soul tree. The soul tree was hit, and the whole tree shook and even trembled. Yuan felt sad for the soul tree when she saw its appearance. Without the divine clothes, the soul tree wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow. Really fragile and vulnerable. Fortunately, the demonic plant's tribulations and tribulation thunders are relatively mild, unlike the blood-eating demonic insects which attack them to death. 3 days and 3 nights, after the calamity thunder fell, the soul tree, which had been shaking for 3 days, finally stopped shaking and stretched out comfortably. The soul tree that was promoted to immortal plant is 20 feet tall, and its trunk, branches, and leaves have all grown exponentially. The jet black tree body and leaves are still flashing with purple spots, which are formed after absorbing the power of thunder and lightning. At this moment, a dozen or so hollow bodies were heard, and in the blink of an eye a dozen monks landed, 30 feet away from the soul tree. Yuan and Mujukan glanced over with their spiritual consciousness and saw a dozen immortal kings and immortal sects. The two of them looked at each other, asking the spiritual pets to pay attention. What kind of tree survived the tribulation and became an immortal plant? It's incredible. An immortal over there looked at the soul tree greedily, and he didn't take Yuan and the other spiritual pets into his heart at all, only the soul tree. That aura seems to be. The man didn't say the next words. He glanced at Yuan and the others with dark eyes. Robbery is best done by one person, but how do you divide it when there are more people? A dozen other people also felt how extraordinary the soul tree was. Some even recognized it as a soul tree, and those few people were filled with turmoil. It's just that they don't show it on their faces. A dozen or so people are secretly making up their minds. More than a dozen people had one thought and one idea: robbery. But not now. More than a dozen people watched for a while and then left. They separated and went to set traps. How could their actions escape the consciousness of Yuan and his wife? They just sneered in their hearts, "You are going to work in vain. Just be extra careful when walking in the fairy world in the future. Soul trees are much more precious than small snakes." If they were asked to choose one of the two, they would definitely choose the soul tree. The value of the soul tree is too high. When the soul collection tree can be found, Yuan collected it into the space, and then everyone entered the space and left. Those who set traps and ambushes spread the news about the soul tree to the fairy world without waiting for anyone. For a time, most people in the fairy world knew about the existence of the soul tree, so people looking for Yuan and his wife everywhere in the fairy world were like crucian carp crossing the river. Yuan had already left the fairy world and arrived in the soul world, and her sons were still in the soul world. Arrived in the soul world, Yuan sent a message to ask the two treasures. Knowing that they were okay, she retreated in space. Yuan is in retreat, mainly to upgrade the soul tree and practice how to use the soul tree to fight enemies. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 604. Chapter 604. Yaoji wakes up. Spring passed and autumn came, and 1,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. In a city in the soul world, Yuan sold all the low-level soul pills that she had refined during her years of retreat here. "Senior, your soul stone." A female clerk smiled like a flower and gave a soul ring to Yuan. This senior's soul elixirs are all high-grade elixirs. Such soul elixirs are rare in the soul world. Such soul elixirs are rare. Alchemists are even rarer. Yuan took the soul ring, looked at the soul stone inside, and nodded with satisfaction. These soul stones are enough for Blackpool to upgrade. "Senior, next time you refine soul pills, remember to come to our store to sell them." Before leaving, the female clerk said again and again. "Okay," Yuan replied lightly and walked towards Fangxi. Over the years, she has finished all the low-level soul medicine in the space. There are not many high-level ones. Over the years, she, Mujukan, and Liang Bao have also spent a lot of soul pills. Fortunately, everyone's souls have made breakthroughs. 4 members of the family have broken through to the 6th level, which is the strength of the soul sect in the soul world. Now they are considered high-level soul cultivators in the soul world. Yuan bought the soul medicine and hurriedly left the city and ran towards the mountains and forests. At the same time, in a cave under a high-level soul vein in the soul world, the eyelids of the goddess Yaoji in the purple gold coffin moved and then opened. The woman next to the purple gold coffin sensed it. She looked over and shouted in surprise, "Senior Yaoji, you are awake." Yaoji blinked, closed her eyes, and sat up slowly after a while. "Thank you, little girl." Goddess Yaoji's voice is like a divine voice. Listening to it makes people feel peaceful and makes them want to keep listening to it. The woman waved her hands repeatedly, "Senior Yaoji, you're welcome. I met you by accident, so I just did it casually." She really didn't mean it. You recognize me? Yaoji was surprised. Yeah, the woman nodded. Although Yaoji rarely appears, there is a portrait of her in the divine world. The first beauty is the goddess in the hearts of many male gods. Almost everyone has her portrait on a jade slip. What's the name of the little girl? Where is this? This is not the god realm or the Zaiwei continent. Woman, Junior Zaiwei, this is a world in the lower realm called the Soul Realm. Yaoji smiled. Oh, thank you goddess Zaiwei. I will repay you after I have taken care of things. No, 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 there is no reward for such a simple effort. Zaiwei waved her hands hurriedly to save the goddess Yaoji. She never thought about getting any reward. At that time, she had just been rescued, and she just thought it was because of yesterday's death. Fruit today. This child is really interesting, Yaoji smiled in her heart. It's not easy to do it with a little effort in Mingxin's formation. Thinking of Ming Xian, Yaoji's heart trembled, and the past events came to mind one by one. Some things need to be settled. She raised her eyes to look at Zaiwei and said gently, I want to return to the god realm. Will you go with me or stay here? Zaiwei's eyes lit up, then dimmed again and said, no, this junior is right here. She wants to return to the god realm, but there is that crazy woman. Zaiwei thinks about it but still won't go back. Even if she stays with the goddess Yaoji, she can protect her for a while, but she can't protect her for the rest of her life. She will improve her cultivation here. Furthermore, if goddess Yaoji was harmed like that, she would definitely seek revenge or something, so how could she have the energy to care about her? Yaoji saw that she had something to hide, so she didn't force it. With her and Tianyan's strength, as long as she didn't die, it would be no problem to find her and repay her later. Sui Yaoji put away the purple gold coffin and sneered in her heart. Mingxin was willing to spend a lot of money to get such a coffin in order to imprison her and torture her. This is used to refine divine weapons. Hundreds of them have to be refined. The artifact is not a piece of cabbage. Then I will return to heaven, Yaoji said, taking out a jade tablet from the storage space and saying, if you want to find me, crush it, I will sense it and will come over as soon as possible. Zaiwei took the jade token, bowed it and said, thank you, senior. She took the jade sign in case she really needed it in the future. Yaoji helped her up, patted her on the shoulder, and disappeared in front of Xiuhi in the blink of an eye. Yaoji rushed into the sky and was about to tear apart the space when her consciousness caught a glimpse of a figure. She was stunned, immediately stopped what she was doing, and looked at the man with all her concentration. Suddenly, the man disappeared out of thin air. Yaoji concentrated on searching again, but she was indeed gone. Zaiwei. Yaoji was stunned. The figure appeared too suddenly and disappeared too quickly, but she could still clearly see the person's appearance. It was clearly her waiter. How could it be possible? How could she appear in the soul world when she was sent to another world? This soul realm is still the lower realm of this realm. How can it be? Yaoji hesitated for a moment and decided to return to the god realm first. After so many years, she still didn't know how Tianyan was doing. Let her come back to her after the matter is settled. She couldn't run away in the soul world anyway. So Yaoji tore apart the space and left. In the space, Yuan was still stunned at the place where she came in. When she entered the space, she felt someone looking at her. Can such a hidden place be seen? Would you like to go out and see who it is? She simply became invisible, stepped out of the space, and looked around, but saw no one. With no one around, Yuan entered the space again. After checking on Xiao Song, he went to see how the lightning protection formation that Mujukan was studying was doing. At that time, when she told Mujukan her idea, he agreed immediately and went to study it. Under the enlightenment tea tree, Mujukan was still thinking hard. He asked for Yuan's star formations and found that those formations were very different from his formations. The name of the formation was the same, but there were many differences in the formation diagram. He became interested and started studying it. Using fairy stones to set up a formation, but the formation cannot be activated. Supposedly they should be the same, except that the star stone is replaced by the immortal stone. Yuan watched him meditate with his eyes closed, but did not come forward to disturb him. He walked straight to the soul flower and sat cross-legged on the soul flower to run his skills. This soul flower originally fed on the soul fairy flower. The soul fairy flower was indeed planted by the mad woman. She moved the pond, and the whole plant was swallowed up. She couldn't find another one for the soul flower to devour, which cut off its path to advancement. It depends on whether you can encounter the soul fairy flower again in the future. The world of immortality is so big, Yuan believes that there is still a chance to encounter it. After finishing his daily practice, Yuan K came to the edge of the black pool and threw the soul stone he got today into the pool. He took care of the magic medicine in the red soil again. These magical medicines are currently unavailable, so she still comes in from time to time to take care of them. The growth rate of the magic medicine is very slow. If you plant it early, you will not have to worry about not having the magic stone to buy the magic medicine when you get to the God realm. After taking care of the medicine field, Yuan left the Red Land. As soon as she came out, Zioxy ran into her arms. "Master, we are about to break through again." End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 605. Chapter 605, Selling Horcruxes. Yuan was stunned for a moment. She was about to break through again. Oh my God, she was not even ready. There were not many fairy stones left. The bad things are going to harm her immortal stone again. Her liver hurt so much. "Master, what's wrong with you?" Zioxy saw that his master was still in a daze. "Is he too happy?" Yuan, no, it was the master who was in pain. More than 800 people have passed through the 9th level of tribulation, and God is going to destroy her wealth. Yuan responded quickly, touched Xiao 11 and said, "Go back and wait while the master prepares something." Oh. Zioxy nodded, glanced at his somewhat silly master, and went back. Yuan didn't want to disturb Mujukan, so she first went to the city to buy a lot of Horcruxes, then returned to space and returned to the fairy world through the realm gate. They have not gone back since the last time the soul tree passed through the tribulation. I wonder if people in the fairy world still remember her soul tree, so Yuan disguised herself and entered a city. Yuan plans to sell some immortal stones for the soul weapons and soul objects he bought in the soul realm this time. He has been in the soul realm these years, and all the immortal stones in the space have been spent. Yuan stopped at a shop called Wanbao Pavilion and watched her for a while before entering. "Welcome, Senior, how can I help you, Junior?" As soon as she entered the store, a female clerk greeted her immediately. "Well, I have something to sell, can you let your manager come?" Yuan directly explained the purpose of her visit. "This? Okay." The female clerk hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "Senior, please come here with me and wait for a while." Speaking, he took her to a lounge and sat down. The female clerk went out without closing the door. Not long after, the female clerk came over with an immortal at the level of an immortal king. "Fairy, I heard that you have something for sale." The steward was not polite when he came, sitting opposite Yuan, and asked straight to the point. "Yes." Yuan took out a box and placed it in front of the steward. The steward opened the box and saw the contents inside. His expression changed instantly and he closed the door with a wave of his hand. He took a deep breath and asked Yuan seriously, "Fairy really wants to sell this thing?" Yuan nodded. "The person in charge will give you a price first." "Good." The steward calmly said for a moment, "Fairy, We are willing to pay 10 million medium-grade immortal stones to buy this object, but the fairy must not reveal that it is sold to buy GE. Of course, isn't she stupid? Why would she still go around yelling and asking people to rob her? The person in charge probably also knew that what he just said was a bit stupid, so he said it and waited for someone to rob him. Their Wanbao pavilion is very powerful, but no one dares to make trouble. He said sarcastically, "Fairy, don't blame me for making such a fuss. This thing is really too precious. Let's tell the truth. Fairy should have known about it more than 1,000 years ago, right? I heard that 2 people owned a soul tree to survive the tribulation and become an immortal plant. Haha, people from the fairy world are still looking for them. I don't want to cause trouble." "Oh? I really don't know." Yuan looked at the manager with interest. She really didn't know. What she said was the truth. She didn't expect that everyone in the fairy world knew about it. Those people were really real. If you don't get it yourself, you won't make it easy for them either. The manager saw that she wanted to continue listening, so he waved his hand in the air, and the images of 2 people appeared. Yuan took a look and saw that it was really her and Mujukan. Yuan sneered in her heart. Don't let her encounter those dozen people. They will definitely capture them and feed them to the soul tree. Aren't they thinking about the soul tree? Let them keep the soul tree company, and they will never be separated in this life. The steward looked at the image in the sky and asked, "How is it? Does the fairy know?" Yuan shook her head and said, "Help me get the fairy stone." Originally she planned to sell 2 pieces to Wanbao Pavilion, but seeing the greed in the manager's eyes, she changed her mind. The manager still wanted to gossip, but when he saw that Yuan suddenly lost interest, he hurried to get the fairy stone. Yuan collected the immortal stones and left Wanbao Pavilion, looking for an inn in the city, planning to stay and sell a few more Horcruxes. 10 million mid-grade immortal stones are enough for 10 blood-devouring demonic insects, and she has to exchange for more. This city is a relatively large city, but it is a small city. Those shops are afraid that they will not be able to eat her Horcrux. But this Horcrux is really valuable in the immortal realm. The middle-grade Horcrux she bought for 10,000 soul stones in the soul realm is worth 10 million mid-grade immortal stones. She is thinking that if she needs immortal stones in the future, she will do it this way. Forget it, it's more cost-effective than her hard work refining the elixir. Walking on the street, in her consciousness, a person followed her casually. Yuan raised her lips, and she knew that the person in charge would definitely send someone to follow her. She smiled evilly, walked quickly to an inn, entered, checked into a room, then changed her clothes and changed her appearance before walking out of the inn. Find a shop again and sold a Horcrux. This was repeated, and when 20 pieces were sold, she left. Then he sold 10 pieces in the same way. After that, he changed to another city and sold 5 pieces. In this way, she sold out all the hundreds of Horcruxes she bought. And there was another wave of madness in the fairy world, looking for those who sold Horcruxes. Yes, Yuan sometimes pretends to be a man. In people's eyes, there are dozens of people selling Horcruxes one after another. Finally, there was another sensation in the fairy world. Looking around again. But the instigator arranged the formation in another place, and she could still arrange the simple immortal gathering formation. After setting it up, she moved out the little snake Xiaoqing. This time Dehei, Jinlong, and Xiaosong have to survive the 3rd level of calamity. Little snake, Xiaoqing, you two need to pay attention, Yuan warned. It will take a long time to overcome the tribulation this time, and it is expected that monks will be attracted again. However, she still arranged a large array of stars, covering thousands of miles in this array. As soon as the arrangement was laid out, Yuan was also shocked. She didn't expect that the star array covered such a wide area. But it also consumes star stones. Once the star formation is activated, absorbing the star stone is like drinking water. Yuan understood that the main reason was that the power of stars in the fairy world was too thin, unlike in Zaiwei continent. With everything ready, Yuan Ke threw Xiaosong out first to escape the tribulation. No one cared about the tribulation of the third-level immortal beast yet. After Xiaosong crossing was over, it was Jinlong and Dehei's turn. These two have now also passed through the 9th level of tribulation. As expected, many monks were attracted to them at once. Yuan smiled bitterly, the blood-eating demonic insects hadn't started yet. When the huge body of the golden dragon stretched across the sky, the monks watching outside were astonished. Ah, the 9th level, my mother the immortal swallowed his saliva and looked at the golden dragon in surprise. The 9th level is the highest level in the immortal world and is expected to ascend to the divine world. Of course the most important thing is to have a top thug. Who dares to attack? When all the immortals looked at the golden dragon, some were envious and jealous, some were greedy, and some just looked at it. There were hundreds of different kinds of people with hundreds of thoughts. Little Snake and Xiaoqing stared at the high-level monks outside with vigilance. As long as they dared to attack the golden dragon, the master ordered that no matter who came, they would all be bitten to death. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 606. Chapter 606 Uncle. The Golden Dragon survived the Thunder Tribulation without the need for divine clothing. Once the Thunder Tribulation was over, he was still coiled in the sky, waiting for a gift from heaven. This is also when he is at his weakest. Someone is moving outside. Suddenly, a ball of light more than 10 feet in size roared over. Bang, it hit the star array heavily. Xiaoqing, get out. When the little snake saw it, he immediately sent a message to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing nodded and flew out of the star formation at the same time as Little Snake. They were Yuan's spiritual pets. Yuan also told them the tricks for entering and exiting the star formation. As soon as the two people flew out, they struck directly at the person just now. Bang, the man was thrown out and he didn't know where he fell. Run quickly. The people onlookers were frightened because they were prone to harm. They didn't know that there were high-level monks hidden in the formation, so they ran away in a swarm. In the immortal world, in the immortal palace, the immortal emperor looked gloomily in the direction of the golden dragon crossing the tribulation. He paused for a moment, and with a movement of his body, he disappeared into the immortal palace. When he appears again, he will be outside the star array. He looked at the star formation carefully, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he was horrified. What kind of formation is this? Don't even know him. He took another look at the golden dragon in the sky and the little snake Xiaoqing outside the formation, and his eyes flashed. When did these people and immortal beasts appear in the fairy world? He can't beat such a dangerous combination. If you kill him as the immortal emperor and seek his position as immortal emperor, then The immortal emperor was not very calm at this time. Yuan saw a person in the formation looking at the formation with an unpredictable expression, and she couldn't see his cultivation clearly, so she only asked Xiaoxi and Xiaoqing to keep an eye on him. At this time, the golden dragon successfully transcended the tribulation, and Yuan immediately entered the space and moved out of Dehei. Dehei's body is now silver-white, not as ostentatious as the golden dragon's body. He flies into the air and almost blends into the sky. Only when the catastrophe comes, can we see clearly that there is a silver dragon in the sky. The immortal emperor who was watching outside shivered. Why was there another silver dragon that was about to cross the 9th level? Where did these people come from? Why has it never appeared before, or did he not even notice that it had appeared? No matter how frightened the immortal emperor was in his heart, he didn't show it on his face and just stood quietly in mid-air watching. Wait until the tribulation is over before talking to the owners of these immortal beasts. Wouldn't it be great if he could be recruited to work for him? The immortal emperor completely ignored it. People can just kill you and replace you and still be loyal to you. You think too much. The great black has passed through the tribulation, and then comes the blood-eating monster insect. Oh my God, what kind of fairy beast is that? The immortals who came from behind stared at the blood-devouring demonic insect, and they didn't know what kind of demonic insect it was. The immortal emperor felt a little broken at this time. His previous thoughts instantly collapsed in his heart, and he was even scared. What kind of genius can contract so many high-level immortal beasts? The immortal emperor could only watch with fear. The other people watching did not dare to get angry, so they retreated and watched from a distance. This tribulation lasted for 50 years, and those who watched were already numb. When the tribulation was completed, all those watching ran away. And the immortal emperor replied even more flustered. Yuans took a long breath and finally finished. However, this time, more than 100 blood-devouring demonic insects did not make it through, and they still died in the breakthrough. Yuan is not too sad, some of it is fate. She can save more than 600 under the thunder disaster this time, and she is already satisfied. Put away the last blood-eating monster insect, collect the star array and the little snake Xiaoqing, duck into the space, and leave through the boundary gate. In the space, Yuan sat in front of the nest of more than 600 blood-eating monster insects. They were still 3 feet long, and they all looked cute and forgot about her. Looking at the master, he wondered why he had been sitting here for so long today. Mujukan came over and held her in his arms, comforting her silently. Yuan raised her head to look at him, leaned her head in his arms and said, "Don't worry, I'm not sad. She just wanted to see them, that's all." "That's good, everyone has his own destiny, and the same goes for immortal beasts," Mujukan said. "Even if there are so many blood-devouring demon insects, even if they do not harm the immortal world, heaven will not allow so many blood-devouring demon insects to survive. Those who come down will definitely reduce their number. In the past, the blood-devouring demon worm could lay eggs, but now it has never laid any eggs." "Shall we stay in the fairy world or go to the soul world?" Yuan asked. "Go back and see Grandpa." Yuan nodded. The next day, they appeared in the immortal mansion in Nantian City. The two of them left the immortal mansion and walked towards Mr. Mew's immortal mansion. After arriving, Mujukan activated the formation. After a while, the formation opened a door, and the two of them stepped in. Grandpa, when the two of them entered, they saw a teenage boy in Mr. Mew's arms. The boy had tiger eyes and was looking at Yuan and Yuan curiously. "You're back, sit down quickly," Mr. Mew greeted the two of them gently. The two of them sat down and looked at the child in Mr. Mew's arms. The child looked very much like Mr. Mew, and they immediately understood. "This is your little uncle, his name is Mew Niangzhen." When Mr. Mew mentioned Mew Niangzhen's name, his face looked lonely, nostalgic, and sad. Mujukan nodded, glanced at Mew Niangzhen and asked, "Grandpa, my little uncle doesn't have spiritual roots?" Mr. Mew sighed, "Yes, when he was 4 or 5 years old, Grandpa wanted to send you a message. Think about it, let him be an ordinary person. Ordinary people can live 1,000 years. That little grandma. This child died after giving birth." Mr. Mew looked sad and buried his face in Mew Niangzhen's back. Both of them let out a long sigh. Yuan only now noticed that Mew Niangzhen's legs seemed to be weak, and they were just hanging on Mr. Mew's body. "No wonder," she said, "she still holds such a big child in her arms." She sent a message to Mujukan, "Have you noticed my uncle's legs?" Mujukan then used his spiritual consciousness to check, and then frowned and asked Mr. Mew, "Grandpa, my uncle's legs. Viviparous. That can be cured." This time Mujukan was speaking. He didn't want to say it directly in front of the child, for fear of leaving a shadow on the child and making him resent everyone in the future like his mother. Mr. Mew shook his head. That's it, Grandpa can take care of him. The two of them were silent. Knowing what Mr. Mew was thinking, he was probably worried about what the child would do when he grew up. After sitting for a long time, Mewjukin briefly talked about their experiences over the years. Finally, Mewjukin asked Mr. Mew to consider whether to help Mew Niangzan recover her legs and cleanse her spiritual roots. The two of them went out to see Feng and the others again. It was learned that Yanner and Yeer had broken through the Fairy Queen and went out to practice. It has been 500 years since I came back. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 607. Chapter 607, Mew Niangzan cleanses the soul. Why do you want Grandpa to consider my uncle's affairs? Returning to the immortal mansion, Yuan couldn't wait to ask Mewjukin. Mr. Mew had his own reasons for not wanting to heal Mew Niangzan. Mewjukin said quietly, Wanner, Grandpa may not have come out of his grief yet, and he hasn't thought about the future. My uncle is still young and doesn't know that his legs and spiritual roots are expected to recover. He will know in the future. What do you think he will do? That's the second Ning Xin. Again Yuan frowned. It may not be the same as Ning Xin, but we just don't want everyone to have regrets in the future. Mewjukin has always known that his grandfather has always regretted that the Mew family is sparse, and he felt even more sad when none of his parents and second uncle's family were left behind. Now that I have a little son, how can I not let him live a long time? At present, Grandpa is still in grief. When he comes to his senses, he will definitely regret it, so he only mentioned it today. As for what will happen to Mew Niangzan when he grows up, they don't need to worry at all. Not to mention that Mew Niangzan is still young and has not started practicing, so he can't threaten anyone. Even if he can cultivate in the future, his cultivation will be far behind him. Yuan was convinced by Mewjukin's words and stopped discussing the matter. She just had her things ready. Now the spirit cleansing flowers in the space are all elixirs. Let alone washing out immortal roots, at least they are high-quality spiritual roots. 10 days later, as expected, Mr. Mew came with Mew Niangzan. Chenur, Grandpa has thought about it. Let your uncle live a normal life. Grandpa has figured it out. No one can tell what will happen in the future. Mr. Mew sighed and said. Mewjukin poured a cup of enlightenment tea for Mr. Mew and said, it's good that Grandpa thinks so. Wanner has already prepared everything. Alas, Mr. Mew sighed. Mewjukin glanced at Mr. Mew. The man who once only wanted to be a general no longer existed, and now he lived like a resentful woman. Grandpa, as cultivators of our generation, we should be open-minded about everything, especially life and death. It's no big deal. If we were mortals, we would have died hundreds of times earlier, so why should Grandpa worry so much? Just let it go. Mr. Mew nodded, sat down with Mew Niangzan beside him, and carefully savored what his grandson just said. He really couldn't let go. Once his eldest son and second son left, he still couldn't accept the white-haired man giving the black-haired man away. Always treat those things with a human mentality. Mr. Mew sighed deeply. It was time for him to let go of his obsession. Grandpa, take this. Yuan placed a jade box in front of Mr. Mew and took out the small pine tree. Xiaosong seems to be about the same age as Mew Niangzan. They are both 10 years old. They should be able to play together. Sure enough, when Xiaosong saw Mew Niangzan, he went to sit in front of him. Mew Niangzan was stunned for a moment at first, then glanced at Mr. Mew, who nodded lovingly towards him. Children are children, and it didn't take long for the two children to play together. At night, Mr. Mew did not go back, so he healed Mew Niangzan's leg here first. As soon as Mew Niangzan's legs were good, she liked her so much that it was rare for her to show a smiling face. He was led by Xiao Song and slowly learned to walk in the house. A few people watching on the side were quite happy, especially Mr. Mu, who was in tears. He glanced at Mu Jukan gratefully. Had it not been for Sun Tzu's words, he almost did another stupid thing. The younger son still likes to live a normal life. There has never been a son with such a bright smile on his face before. They are father and son. The old man has a bitter look on his face and the little one has a bitter look on his face. Mr. Mu's heart became more active now than his younger son's. My dear daughter-in-law, I will trouble you when Xiao Nianer washes her spiritual roots later. Yuan smiled and said, Grandpa is still polite to grandson's daughter-in-law, just leave it to grandson's daughter-in-law. Okay, Grandpa won't be polite to you anymore. Mu Niangzhen felt a little tired after walking away from the incense stick. She threw herself into Mr. Mu's arms, her little face flushed. He then boldly looked at Yuan and Mu Jukan. Is uncle afraid of us? Yuan knelt down and looked into his eyes and asked. Mu Niangzhen shook her head. Then I'll take you there and help you see. You can practice like us in the future, okay? Mu Niangzhen looked up at Mr. Mu again. Mr. Mu stroked his hair and asked warmly, Is Xiao Nianer willing to practice? From now on, he will go to heaven and earth like his father. Mu Niangzhen blinked her eyes full of longing. He nodded, I think so. Haha, Xiao Nianer is very good. Go with your nephew-in-law and do whatever she asks you to do. Daddy is waiting for you here, okay? Good. Yuan smiled. The old man protected this child so well. A 10-year-old still communicates like a 2 or 3-year-old. I think back when Liang Bao was 10 years old, he was killing monsters in the Juya forest. Come on, come with me. Yuan stretched out her hand. Mu Niangzhen hesitated for a moment, then put his little hand in Yuan's. Yuan took him in hand, nodded to Mr. Mu, and walked into the training room. In the training room, Yuan prepared the fairy spring in the space, asked him to sit in it, and took out a soul-washing flower. Little uncle, are you afraid of pain? Mu Niangzhen shook her head without hesitation and said firmly, I'm not afraid. Well, I am a little man after eating this, your stomach will hurt very much. You must hold it back and not move or fall, otherwise, all your previous efforts will be wasted and you will not be able to practice again in the future. Do you understand? I know. Mu Niangzhen nodded seriously. Yuan reached out and touched his head. He was a determined child. She put the spirit washing flower into Mu Niangzhen's mouth and asked him to sit cross-legged. At first, Mu Niangzhen just knitted her brows together, but then he gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound, and a huge amount of sweat flowed down his forehead. He seemed to be unconscious, but still gritted his teeth and persisted. Even though his little body couldn't help shaking, he didn't move or make a sound. Yuan was a little moved when she saw this child is so tolerant. When he grew up, he became a great person. After persisting for 5 hours, Mu Niangzhen fainted when the soul washing was successful. Yuan picked her up and cleaned him up before carrying him out. How are you, Chen-er-in-law? Did you succeed? Mr. Mu took Mu Niangzhen and asked eagerly. Yuan's mouth twitched. Don't you know how to check it with your spiritual sense? She said, 5 spiritual roots. 5 spiritual roots? Okay, as long as you have spiritual roots. Mr. Mu nodded excitedly. It seems that the spiritual roots washed out are all 5 spiritual roots. Yuan also said that the spiritual roots washed out by Mrsu and others in the past were also 5 spiritual roots. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 608. Chapter 608. The 2 treasures are hunted down. She thought it was at least a high-quality spiritual root, or a mutated spiritual root, but she didn't expect it to be a 5th-grade spiritual root, and it was still the kind that had to be cultivated from the Qi training stage. It's good if it can be washed out. It doesn't matter what kind of spiritual root it is, Mujukin patted her. As long as she had spiritual roots, it would make the difference between heaven and earth. Yuan nodded. In the following days, Mu Niangzhen began to practice. Everyone gave Mu Niangzhen their cultivation experience and skills in immortality. Mu Niangzhen has lived up to everyone's hard work and practiced seriously. 10 days later, he will reach the second level of Qi training, which makes Mr. Mu feel relieved. His younger son's qualifications are not bad. Chenur, let's go back. The father and son have been here for 10 years, and Mu Nian's heart has reached the golden elixir stage, Mr. Mu and Mujukin said. Everyone has to practice cultivation, and they have no obligation to guide their yearning mind every day. Uncle, aren't you used to it? Mujukin asked puzzledly. Why would you leave if you are doing well? Isn't it nice for the family to be together? When did Grandpa become so different from them? Mr. Mu looked at his grandson's bewildered face and said, No, don't you want to practice? Mujukin suddenly realized. He smiled and said, Grandpa, you said this. My grandson thought it was because my uncle was not used to it. He wanted to go back to that fairy mansion. Grandpa didn't have to think too much. We are one family, how could we act like two families? You and your uncle can practice with peace of mind. Our cultivation does not necessarily require practicing step by step every day. That's okay. Mr. Mu actually doesn't want to leave. To be honest, here he has his grandson to help guide his younger son, and there are also training resources. The younger son's cultivation is really making rapid progress. The days passed very quickly, and 100 years passed in the blink of an eye, and my yearning mind has reached the perfection of the Mahayana stage. When the time comes, I can break through to the human immortality. Mu Niangzhen has also grown into a handsome man. Mr. Mu said he looks most like him when he was young. Chenur's wife, your uncle, and I are going out today. Let's take him out for a look. Mr. Mu packed his things, called Mu Niangzhen, and said goodbye to Mujukin and his wife directly. Okay, please pay attention to safety outside, little uncle, don't be naughty and take good care of Grandpa. Mujukin said it to Mr. Mu and then to Mu Niangzhen. This guy looks honest on the surface, but is actually a sultry guy. I went out with Xiao Song to cause trouble, and even took off the skin of Xiao Song. Mu Niangzhen blinked at them and said, Don't worry, eldest nephew, I will definitely take good care of Dad. Mujukin agreed not to call him his eldest nephew. In these days, every time he calls, he is not allowed to call him. Every time, he smiles so playfully. Really, Dad? Mu Niangzhen held old man Mu's arm and gave him a wink. Mr. Mu knocked his head off and said, There is no proper shape. Let's go. Mr. Mu said to Mujukin and his wife, and then left with Mu Niangzhen. Hey, Grandpa's heart disease is finally cured, Yuan said, looking at the backs of the two people leaving. That's right, thanks to such a living treasure. It's a good life, just like before, an old man facing a little old man. Let's go, we should go see our sons. Mujukin hugged Yuan and said. Grandpa's matter was finally resolved, and the big stone weighing on his heart was finally gone, and he felt relieved. Well, it's time to take a look at them, Yuan said. The two of them packed up their things and came directly from the realm gate to the Soul Realm. Soul Realm. In a secret place, Liangbao was seriously injured. The two brothers fled desperately, with a woman in purple chasing them behind them. She had an angry look on her face. It was hard for her to chase after these two little brats. Suddenly, she flicked her wrist, and a ray of red light flew out from her soul beast bag. It was a huge red soul beast. This spirit beast has a human head, a snake body, and bird wings. It is completely red, and its body is covered with red scales. Its eyes are red, and like its master, it glares fiercely at the two treasures galloping in front of it. It is more than 10 feet long and more than 10 feet high, with 4 extremely sharp claws, currently grabbing at the air. The woman sat on its back and ordered, "Hurry and catch those 2 people. Those 2 people must have treasures in them." She used soul magic, and the other person's soul was not injured at all. Only one was injured. Injury on the body is of no use, but it will not lead to death. The flying python nodded and flew away immediately. The speed is as fast as lightning. Flying pythons are famous for their flying speed, and soul cultivators love to catch them to make contracted soul beasts. The flying python of the woman in purple is so weird. It had an accident when it transformed, and it became like this. The woman in purple is very disgusted. If she hadn't been able to catch up with the 2 treasures today, how could she let this ugly monster come out and embarrass himself? The flying python's speed is indeed incredible, and it will soon catch up with the 2 treasures. Liang Bao's spiritual consciousness felt anxious when he saw the man and the beast chasing after him. "Brother, it's better to not enter the space and be exposed than to be killed," Bao said eagerly as he was about to be overtaken. "Okay, we are at the turning point ahead." Dabao pointed to a huge boulder on the ground and said. Then the 2 treasures flew towards the ground. Aerial targets are still too visible. Roar! The flying pythons behind them saw their prey in hand, but unexpectedly they suddenly flew towards the ground. It got angry, roared, and chased after it. The woman in purple saw it turning in front of her, and she understood what Liang Bao meant. She raised her hand, and tens of thousands of red fireballs fell from the sky, heading straight for the 2 treasures. "Hurry!" Bao shouted. The roaring fireball is a fireball in the soul art, not an immortal fireball. This fireball technique can burn people's souls. Although it cannot burn them to death, it can still make them drink from a pot. "Don't worry, Bao, use the soul thorn quickly." Dabao held Bao up and asked him to launch the soul thorn. Bao said anxiously, "Okay, you fly quickly and I will fly." "Okay, hurry up," Dabao urged. Bao didn't need to fly. He immediately concentrated his soul and sent out 20 soul thorns instantly. 20 soul thorns were sent out, passing through the rain of fireballs, and headed straight for the flying python. The flying python was just chasing after it, but it didn't know that the 2 treasures would still be able to fight back. Puff puff. 20 soul thorns all shot into the flying python's sea of consciousness. Ah ah ah. The flying python let out a painful cry and fell headlong to the ground. The woman in purple was so angry at the sudden situation that her lungs exploded. She also didn't expect that the 2 brats were still capable of fighting back. The flying python fell to the ground. She jumped up and flew away from the flying python. She was too lazy to care about its life and death. She focused on chasing the 2 cubs. The 2 brothers took a breather, turned sharply at the corner, and then the 2 brothers ducked into the space. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 609. Chapter 609 Meeting Xiaohe in a Secret Place. Boom. They entered the space one breath ago, and the fireball behind them caught up with them the next breath, and they all hit the boulder. The boulder was instantly blown to pieces. "Ah ah ah, I'm so angry, you 2 little bastards, I must catch you." The woman in purple flew up, and in front of her was ashes flying all over the sky. There was no trace of the 2 treasures. She was so angry that she shouted to the sky. Boom! She struck out with another palm, creating a bottomless pit in the ground. In the space, the 2 brothers were paralyzed on the ground. Over the years, the 2 brothers had been hunted, robbed, and killed in the soul world. They lost count of the number of times. Every time, I was extremely embarrassed, and each time I had to hide in the space to escape. "Brother, I miss my parents so much, Urbeo said suddenly as he put a pill into his mouth. They are safe only with their parents. This soul world is much scarier than the fairy world. They will kill them and rob them at every turn. Next time, don't come out. Come on. Dabeo looked at Urbeo with contempt. He was becoming more and more pretentious. In the world of cultivating immortals, there is no pure land. There is fighting and killing everywhere. Monks everywhere tuck their heads in their waistbands and walk in the world of cultivating immortals. Urbeo pursed his lips and said nothing. It was important to recover from his injuries. Liangbao recovered his injured hand and stepped out of the space. This time they emerged invisible. Boom boom boom. As soon as they came out, a sharp gust of wind hit them. As soon as the two of them sensed it, they immediately moved out of the way. In the distance, the woman in purple felt a trace of soul power fluctuations, and she knew that the two of them must have become invisible. So she didn't leave at all and just stayed here to wait. As expected, the two little brats couldn't hold their breath anymore. When Liangbao flew out, he saw clearly that she was still the old woman. The two brothers were so angry that they had to leave first. They couldn't beat the old woman. No need to fight. The old woman's cultivation level is a whole level higher than theirs. The woman in purple failed again and had to leave. This secret place was discovered by a powerful person. Everyone was hunting for treasures at the moment, so she let the two cubs go for the time being. Yuan and his wife came to the soul world and found that they were in a secret place, so they came through the world gate. The two people came out of the space and saw the woman in purple leaving. The two of them didn't pay much attention to it. Fighting was commonplace everywhere. Let's go and see if there's anything we missed. Yuan held Mujukan's arm and said. Don't you go and see your son first. They are all here, there is no rush for this moment. Okay then. Mujukan scratched her nose lovingly. Over the past 1,000 years, Wanner's appearance has changed a bit. It's not that she's getting older, but that she's completely different from the way she looked when they first met. It is even more beautiful now. At first glance, it is astonishing. If they hadn't been together all the time, he would have thought that Wanner had been taken away. Thinking that Wanner was originally reborn, this must be her true appearance. On the other side, Xiaohe is also wandering around in the secret place. Over the past few years, he has been bored to death by himself, so he has been walking around in the soul world. No, as soon as the secret place was discovered, she came to join in the fun. She was just joining in the fun, and she didn't like anything in it. Suddenly, two figures appeared in her consciousness. Goddess Yaoji, she has not returned to the god realm, so why is she here? Xiaohe was about to say hello, but suddenly, she remembered that the man next to Goddess Yaoji was not God Lord Tianyan at all. Who is the person so close to Goddess Yaoji? Xiaohe looked at it again with her spiritual consciousness. She frowned and was startled. This person is not the Goddess Yaoji. But why are they so similar? So, is she their daughter? It is said that they had a daughter who disappeared together. Xiaohe looked again and found that his age was not right either. The daughter of Goddess Yaoji should be at least 100,000 years old. The one in front of me is only over 10,000 years old, not even 20,000 years old. However, regardless of whether it was true or not, just to say hello, Xiaohe still appeared in front of Yuan and his wife in the blink of an eye. Senior. Yuan and the two suddenly saw a stunning beauty appearing out of thin air in front of them. They immediately backed away and Yuan shouted weakly. But the stunning beauty was still looking at her in trance. Who are you, the goddess Yaoji? Xiaohe asked after a long while. Who is the goddess Yaoji? Yuan blurted out, her heart sank. This was the third person's curiosity about her appearance. She heard from the thief god that the wife of Lord Tianyan was named Yaoji. Yaoji is in the god realm, and someone actually knows Yaoji in the secret place of the soul realm. This made Yuan have to deal with it carefully. Xiaohe was a little disappointed after hearing this. He didn't know who the goddess Yaji was. It should have nothing to do with the goddess Yaji. Otherwise she could still help the person in front of her. She didn't notice at all that Yu and Wan were not shocked when they heard about the goddess Yaoji, they were just confused. This is the soul realm, not the god realm. In the divine world, goddess is the honorific title given to female nuns. In the fairy world, respectable women cultivate themselves into fairies. It was also because she was careless and acted like she was in the god realm. In addition, she didn't know that the person in front of her was the person who rescued her from the prison. If she had known, I wonder if she would have had the idea of helping. Xiaohe shook his head, turned and walked away. On the other hand, Yuan and the other two looked grave. This female cultivator was obviously from the god realm. I wonder what this goddess is doing in the soul world. Could it be that the woman imprisoned in space came to the lower world to look for her? I saw that she looked similar to the goddess Yaoji, so I asked this question. Waner, let's go. Mujukan gently touched Yuan with his elbow and said gently that he knew Waner's identity, but it also came from Yuan. Yuan knows as much as he knows. Let's go. Yuan nodded, but she was no longer in the good mood before. She said, let's find our sons and go to the god realm. Good. When the two found the two treasures, they were chased by the woman in purple again. Yuan directly moved the two treasures into the space, threw the woman in purple into a small deserted world, and took away all her things. In the space, the two treasures were cleaning up the treasures of the woman in purple, but their mother had experienced the harm herself, so she just cleaned them up as easily as she came. Yuan is already standing in the god realm now. She found the god of thieves. As soon as the god of thieves entered the space, he kept banging. Oh, girl, you just came. If you come early, you can see a good show. You don't know, 1,000 years ago, Madame Yaoji suddenly appeared and went directly to the temple. Hey, it's a pity that the thunder was loud and the rain was small. Not long after Madame Yaoji entered the temple, it was reported that Madame Yaoji actually wanted to marry the Lord God. An adult becomes a concubine. Tisk tisk tisk, brightened everyone's eyes. Yuan frowned and asked, already married? Well, I got married early. Where is Mr. Yanshin that day? He, the thief god, shook his head and said, I haven't heard anything about him. Girl, you don't think Mrs. Yaoji was coerced, do you? End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 610. Chapter 610. What happened that year? Yuan nodded seriously. She feels this way. The thief god shook his head and said, everyone has guessed this question, but there are rumors that Mrs. Yaoji is voluntary. Whether she is voluntary or not, you will understand if you take a look. Yuan raised her lips. She was really interested in this Mrs. Yaoji and wanted to see what kind of woman she was. How much does it resemble her? Are you really related to her? I advise you to be more honest. After hearing what she said, the thief god's face became more serious. Yuan curled her lips, knowing that there was a master who was not good at criticizing, and she would not look at it openly. She had not lived enough, so she said, don't worry, I'm watching from a distance. The god of thieves rolled his eyes at her. This girl acted too boldly. Anyway, I've reminded you that Lord God is not one of those cat and dog figures. Let me go. I won't take risks with you. As timid as a mouse, Yuan looked at the thief god with contempt. What are you talking about, girl? The god of thieves gave her a shock. Yuan touched her head and turned to look at Mujukan, who had remained silent. Take care of your master. Mujukan is funny, he is two living treasures, one dares to scold and the other dares to hit. He said, okay, Waner, wait, my husband will vent his anger on you. After saying that, he gave the thief god a look. The god of thieves snorted. In front of his disciples, how could he compare to his wife, the brat? He was not the master in his eyes. Stinky girl, the god of thief dropped these 3 words and ran away quickly. If you are too late, you will be beaten. Having not been in for a while, this girl got something good again, and he needs to benefit from it. As soon as the thief god left, Mujukan kissed Yuan on the face. Waner, my husband is going to vent your anger, so be careful. After saying that, Mujukan went after the god of thieves. Yuan curled her lips, knowing that Mujukan was looking for the god of thieves to avoid the lightning array. Yuan also came to the training room and asked Xiaoji to approach the shrine. Xiaoji nodded and approached the shrine cautiously, trying not to have any fluctuations in divine power. In the shrine, Yaoji looked at Tianyan in the amethyst coffin. She wished she could kill that Tianya, the main god. She came back that year and hurriedly came to find the Lord God Tianya and asked about Tianyan's whereabouts. In the eyes of the world, the Lord gods Tianya and Tianyan both love her. In fact, this is not the case. Tianya is coveting the inheritance of their master. She, Tianya, and Tianyan are brothers and sisters. They come from the Tiandao sect, the most mysterious and oldest sect in the divine world. Tianya is the eldest brother among the disciples of their generation, Tianyan is the second senior brother, Tianchen is the third senior brother, Tianyu is the fourth senior brother, and Tiankai is the fifth senior brother. The eldest brother became the main of the divine world, and the 5 senior brothers served as the 5 great kings of the divine realm. The divine realm is firmly controlled by Tiandao sect, but it is also the power behind the divine realm. Once the god realm encounters force majeure, the talents of Tiandao sect will come forward to maintain it. Ordinarily, since Tianya has become the main god, Tiandao sect's inheritance Starju should be passed on to him, but I don't know why it was not passed on to him, but to her, the legitimate daughter of the head of Tiandao sect. She passed it on to her daughter Xiao Ziwei. It is not considered passed down by her, but Xin Chenju automatically recognized the owner. When Ziwei was born, her palace was shrouded in purple clouds. As soon as she was born, all the purple clouds submerged into Xiao Ziwei's body, and the star art in her divine ring flew out automatically and submerged into Xiao Ziwei's sea of consciousness. Yaoji was overjoyed. Xin Chenju only recognizes the star body as the main body, which means that her daughter is a star body. She knows better than anyone what the astral body represents. The Lord of the divine realm must be the astral body. The reason why Tianya can be the Lord God is that for millions of years, except for the leader of Tiandao sect who is a star body, no star body has been born in the God realm. Hence, the current head of the Tiandao sect is actually the former main of the God realm. For some reason that she didn't know, the head of the Tiandao sect resigned from the position of chief god, but there was no suitable candidate for the position of chief god, so he had no choice but to inherit the position of chief god. The birth of Xiao Ziwei is undoubtedly on the road to the main of Duan Tianya. To be on the safe side, the couple hid little Ziwei in the Ziwei continent, where she was taken care of by her concubine. Who would have known that her good concubine Ming Xian Zhaoxuan belonged to Tianyan, and Tianyan married her Yaoji. Ming Xian was unwilling to do so, so she colluded with Tianya and informed Xiao Ziwei about her star body. After Tianya learned about it, he quietly came to Ziwei continent and wanted to kill Ziwei. Killing Ziwei, although he will not be recognized as the master of Starju, he can get Starju. At that time, Ziwei had just reached the level of God King and was no match for Tianya. Ziwei used all her means to save her life. The couple arrived, Tianyan and Tianya fought together, and she used a secret method to send Ziwei out of the Ziwei continent. After she sent away Ziwei, her powers were greatly reduced. Unexpectedly, that Mingzin attacked her from behind, causing her to faint. As soon as she came back, Tianya threatened her with Tianyan. For Tianyan, she had to be his concubine, only in name. If she wanted to truly be his woman, she would rather die with Tian Yan. She had begged her father for help, but he was in seclusion. She had begged her mother, but her mother was unable to do anything. And Tian Yan's soul was imprisoned by Tian Ya, as if she was asleep. She didn't know what to do. Junior sister is really in love with the second junior brother. At this time, a sarcastic voice remembered. Yao Ji glanced at him coldly. Elder brother is not just as persistent. Perseverance to obtain star judgment. Yao Ji snorted in her heart. So what if you get it? You can't practice, it's just a useless jade slip in your hand. Tian Ya doesn't care about Yao Ji's sarcasm. He doesn't just want to get Starju, but he wants to get the star body. He did have an idea for master, but he didn't have the guts yet. Otherwise he would really want a broken shoe. He is the Lord God, and he can't find any kind of pure woman he wants. If you don't control Yao Ji and his wife, how could Zai Wei come to your door? Tian Ya sat in front of the amethyst coffin, looking at Tian Yan, feeling indescribably happy. It was indeed Yao Ji who he liked first. Unfortunately, Yao Ji did not like him and married his second junior brother. There is no way he is as good as this good-for-nothing, who is handsome and highly cultivated. He is so kind to Yao Ji. Yao Ji is blind. Junior sister doesn't want the second junior brother to wake up, he asked calmly, as if they were chatting about family matters, not at all like he controlled Tian Yan's life and death. Are you willing to trade Zai Wei's life? Yao Ji looked up at him. At this moment, Ziaji quietly approached and opened the interface for Yuan. Yuan happened to hear these words when she saw the opposite side clearly. When she saw the faces of the two of them clearly, her head suddenly buzzed, and an indescribable anger and discomfort suddenly arose in her heart. Especially when she saw Yao Ji's face that looked exactly like hers, Yuan's mouth opened unconsciously. End of this chapter.